All right, from proof of work to proof of stake can't be that hard, right? This is not like a deep dive on all things proof of stake. This is a bit more security focused, and it's not on the how do we break this thing, but it's how do we design a protocol in this critical transition to be safe, and some of the different considerations here. To understand it, we are going to go just quickly into what the merge looks like. So this is Ethereum today. We have a bunch of mining equipment. It's really great, but maybe it's not that bad today, but if like if the Ethereum price 10x or something, all of a sudden it'd be pretty bad because the amount of mining power would scale linearly with the price. So the Beacon Chain launched at the end of 2020. This is what Ethereum looks like today. It is these two things operating in parallel, these two relatively disparate systems, although the economic seed, the deposits come from that proof of work chain and the existing execution layer to bootstrap the Beacon Chain. But really we have a proof of stake consensus mechanism coming to consensus on itself, operating in parallel to the existing proof of work chain that we all know and love and everyone's hanging out in, sending transactions and having state roots and that kind of stuff. The actual merge looks like this. So essentially, the consensus mechanism is the shell, it's the cradle, it's the home for the execution layer of Ethereum. At time point A, proof of work is securing the Ethereum execution layer, and at some point, the coordination point, which I'll get into, which is that this terminal total difficulty, the validators, they say, you know what, we're in charge now, and we have this kind of continuous nature of the execution layer going from proof of work into our new proof of stake home. Something that's important to think about in terms of security and in terms of understanding some of the attacks and different things going on here is how forks are activated. So normally, we have a blockchain. A blockchain is really just a subset of a block tree. We all agree on what is the tip and we have a single chain, but really there's any amount of forking that can happen, and there's this block tree and we have to kind of navigate our way through it. In a normal fork, we pick a block height and we activate whatever the upgrade is simultaneously at any of these block heights. It's really nice, it's really easy. So maybe the center of this is the main chain and maybe there's a bit of forking, maybe there's like an attempt to attack on the left and somewhere else on the bottom. But in the 1559 activation could happen on all of these forks simultaneously, and like the state transition happens, you move into that block height, and on this fork you get 1559, on this fork you get 1559, on this fork you get 1559, and it's all good. So the question is, why can't we do that in this proof of stake world? Something that's very important in the transition is that the validators need to be in charge. And so when the validators begin to build the execution layer of Ethereum, they trump the fork choice. They take over, and the miners no longer can have the power to kind of reorg and control, because that's the whole point of this thing, is to shift the power from the proof of work miners to the proof of stake validators. And so if we activate the fork on any potential branch, we only want this to happen once because we want what the validators to say and do to be in charge. So if we allow it to activate on any of these side branches, then we might have an attack chain that jumps up and runs from the side and maybe has a low total difficulty, so low crypto economic weight. But if it reached that block height, then the validators would say, okay, we're in charge here, but because the validators are only supposed to say they're in charge once and the fork to happen really in this one place, we would now have the ability for maybe an attacker to make a very low weight chain but long chain to kind of preempt and take over the merge and do a reorg at the point of the merge. So in this world, we want the merge activation to only really happen in one place. So even if this low total difficulty, which is economically easy to attack, the validators don't really mind it. They don't really look at it, and they activate it in one place. The notion of logic changes within the execution layer can happen kind of simultaneously in many different places, but because this is really that outer shell, it can't really happen simultaneously because the validators are only going to attempt to be building one chain. So this is what Ethereum looks like after the merge. A blockchain, it's a bit greener. So who are our adversaries when we're thinking about the merge? The miners, nothing against the miners, but the miners, they are the potential adversary here. Bugs, as Dave was going to, honestly, that's like our major adversary, is this little guy on the green leaf. Stakers, Maybe, and shadowy supercoders for sure. Stakers, not really. Honestly, like a lot of the protocol design here assumes that stakers want this to happen, right? And I think that's like a pretty safe assumption. Stakers might become your adversary after. You know, they might collude, they might do all, but to do anything that is valuable for them to be your adversary, they want the merge to happen. So, you know, we kind of take that for granted. So the miner becomes the adversary because really a lot of what the mining and proof of stake and any of these crypto economic algorithms, the incentives really rely on this like infinite game. They rely on like the fact that we're going to continue playing the game. You know, so the fact that a block is built, why don't I try to build on another block? Because I kind of want to build on the block so I want to build on what's the tip because everyone's going to think that's the tip and we're going to kind of keep going. And any of these, any of the many attacks, like doing deep reorgs, like kind of flooding the whole system and forming large cartels, like they kind of wreck the system. So there's this kind of notion of a miner or a proof of stake validator, like they're playing this long and repeated game. When we have this transition to proof of stake, the game becomes finite, and so the equilibrium really of what we expect here is broken, and so we might expect in the extreme, you know, if they are rational actors, to do something different. So what are their options? Maybe chaos at the merge, right? Like doing reorgs, like everyone turning off their machines, all sorts of stuff. Maybe they know the merge is coming and they know this game is over, so there's not going to be mining rewards in the future. So they might actually do reorg attacks. So whereas they previously wouldn't have formed a cartel or attempted to do some of these attacks, you might expect them maybe in the month leading up to the merge. They might try to make Ethereum Carbon, which maybe is an attack on Ethereum, but that's also kind of their right to fork and do whatever they want, you know, the one true proof of work chain. Or they might actually just sell and go away, which I think is probably very likely as we lead up, and it's something we also want to kind of keep in mind. So let's look at each of these things and how we handle them in the protocol. So chaos at the merge. Chaos at the merge really is not, because we have this TTD thing. If TTD is hit, the system is designed to kind of be resilient. It's designed for the proof of stake validators to be able to coordinate. You know, even if you had 30 forks and you had TTD hit simultaneously on all of them, the proof of stake validators, they pick one, they're going to take control, and they're going to move forward. So there's really a lot of resilience built into if we hit that TTD number. But the question is maybe if we don't hit that TTD. So if we have a bunch of malicious reorgs before, or maybe even just one, if you had a 100-block reorg today, we'd probably say, well, the chain's pwned, we can't trust the miners, and we probably need to take a liveness hit and just abort. We have to abort this proof of work chain because it is no longer safe. You cannot get any sort of guarantee if you're seeing these deep reorgs and these double spends and different things. So there is a feature of the spec. It's called TBH override. That's the terminal block hash override. And essentially, in this extreme scenario, we would have to coordinate as a community, essentially say, this is the end of the proof of work chain, and at this point in time, we're all going to build on top of that. This is a pretty nuclear option. It's not something that you want to hit, but again, like if the miners are providing no quality of service and they're doing deep reorgs, you kind of have to take this liveness hit, do this extra protocol coordination, and move forward. Ethereum Carbon is also an option, so there might be an attempt to create a proof of work, a sustainable proof of work fork. I kind of believe that there's extremely little value proposition to this, especially in the context, and one, I think most of the Ethereum community says screw proof of work, but also the application layer is highly interconnected, and I personally expect any sort of fork to kind of implode on the application layer and the interconnectedness there. Another thing we might expect from miners is they might just start selling. And I think actually we've seen some already evidence of that, and that the GPU market is finally, after many, many years, cooling down, and the prices are beginning to be suppressed. So, you know, the miner might make this kid really happy, and he'll finally get his graphics cards. But in the event that this happens, the total difficulty growth might actually slow. So there might be the release of client software, the attempt to coordinate on a terminal total difficulty, but you know, the precipitous drop off of the mining power might slow down that. Maybe you were predicting it was going to happen in 2 weeks, and it's going to happen in like 8 weeks instead. We do have a terminal total difficulty override as a command line flag in these clients, and also the ability to release new configs. So essentially, if the merge slows drastically, we can kind of coordinate and recalibrate there. I think one of the scary problems here would be if you have this precipitous drop and you have the cartel form, and because a precipitous drop also makes it much easier to attack. So a lot of little scary things can happen here. Miners haven't been really great at coordinating in the past. We shall see, but we do ultimately have the ability to kind of jump out, and because at the point that either the software or the community says proof of stake's now in charge, the miners literally have zero power at that point. So it's really, do we get to that point through an automated mechanism, or in the extreme, do we have to use kind of a communal override? Something that was explored and nothing that made it into the protocol was, can we actually design incentives or design the system to kind of make what is becoming a finite game look a bit more like an infinite game, or at least like a game with some longevity. So one proposal was pay miners to just mine empty blocks on the proof of work chain for X amount of time beyond. So you could do that two ways. You could put a bunch of capital into a contract on the proof of stake chain that miners can show up with proofs about headers that they had mined, and it forms a chain and they get a payout. You could also just have some centralized entity that promises to do so, or you could actually have the protocol itself do so. But any of these kind of have one high cost. Somebody's got to pay for it, either through inflation if the protocol were to do it, or somebody with deep pockets has to do it. And there's a lot of things that we'd rather probably pay for, and it also brings quite a bit of complexity, especially any of the automated mechanisms. And this thing's, we've tried to simplify it as much as possible, but it's probably the most complicated and high stakes upgrade ever in blockchains, period. Another thing that was considered was randomizing the actual time of the merge. So say we released all the software today, and the software was like, sometime in the next 2 years, the merge will happen after a random condition is hit. We have this RANDAO thing. We also have a number of other things in proof of work that are not too manipulatable. And so you could utilize some value from there to actually do the merge at a random time. We have high confidence that in 24 months that the merge happens. I think this is kind of a clever mechanism, but it only really works at that time horizon. The expected time horizon is really long. So if you did it, the merge will randomly happen in the next 2 weeks. The miner, that doesn't help simulate a long game for the miners. So their incentives kind of, as that randomized time, the expected randomized time degrades, this thing kind of degrades. And I don't think anyone has the patience to do it long enough such that the miners might kind of be convinced that there's some expectation of the game still being played tomorrow. I think you'd have to do it on the order of a year or two, and win merge. Another thing is to keep all our cards close to our chest. Not to go dark on public calls, not tell the community what's going on, and then all the client teams coordinate and say, okay, we're going, and we go in 2 days, and hopefully that prevents the miners from doing it. That's kind of impossible given the way that we kind of develop everything in the public, and the kind of the expectation around this, and I don't think it's really that good of a strategy. And for all of these things, and for everything ever in distributed consensus systems like this, complexity is evil. And if we can, not make the system to pay for mining empty blocks, or not have to deal with randomized time and different things like that, we really should, because complexity is the root of all evil. It makes things take longer. It makes there be more bugs. Shadowy supercoders. Proof of stake has been live in production. It's been doing its thing, but there's not that much incentive to attack it right now. So if you have some 0 days in your back pocket, it's probably time at the merge or right after the merge. So we shall see. That's why we have the security team. That's why we have the bug bounty program. So we have a lot of people looking at this thing. But if there's a 0 day, it's probably going to happen after the merge. Complexity is honestly the scariest adversary for me. It's the thing that keeps me up at night. It's the reason the merge didn't happen, 2 months ago. It's because we don't want to have bugs. It's because we don't want to have this. We want to do this thing right the first time. And so complexity minimization at the protocol level and continued testing and security analysis is really, I think, where the scary stuff lies. But yeah, so TLDR is, this thing isn't, the actual transition mechanism isn't actually that complex, and that's by design, because any sort of additional complexities here don't really help us out too much and make everything take longer and have more complexity. But we also have to plan for the unexpected. What happens when the miners attack us? How do we deal if there's some major FUD campaign that's targeted right around the merge? How do we, all sorts of stuff. So that's it. Keep it simple and plan for the unexpected. Thank you. And a huge shout out to, there's a lot of people in the audience that are securing this thing, building this thing, researching this thing, designing this thing. Literally like hundreds of people work on it. So thank you. Any questions?
Any questions?
I have a question. Why do we have to fear miners? Because in the end of the day, all it takes is just to upgrade nodes, and if nodes no longer accept proof of work, then I guess it's done. They can cause minor inconvenience for a few minutes or maybe for tens of minutes, but I don't think it is a big of an issue, especially if other solutions introduce a lot of complexity.
I generally agree, but I think one of the things that I didn't highlight here was that we want Ethereum to be live through the merge, and so you have to have the miners until there's some point of agreed coordination by validators to be live. If we said, okay, this is the terminal block, and in 2 days after everyone upgrades their software, which you have to have some amount of lag time once you've agreed, that's where the proof of stake will build upon. If you take the liveness hit, it's pretty easy. And so we do actually have the fallback in the event that miners do attack to take that liveness hit. But the system's been designed to not, and in doing so, that means you have to have the miners until that exact time. So yeah, do you think that, here's the question. Do you think miners are going to attack? Do you think that there's
No, yeah. I don't think that they will attack, because usually miners are huge entities, huge mining pools, and I think that if they attack openly, this may be a huge reputation hit and probably may have some legal.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's a very interesting point that we can kind of lean on for this one time. It's not something you want to lean on in perpetuity for the protocol, but that is a nice thing to help us in this one discrete instance. Yeah.
Centralization helps decentralization, right?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks so.
Does anybody else? Sorry.
Don't ask me what you're about to ask me.
You know I'm going to ask it. Hey, Danny, when merge? I'm actually joking.
You got to ask all these other people in the audience that are actually in charge of this thing.
So my actual question is about client diversity, because that's what I do. How worried should we be about execution layer client diversity?
Similar bad things can happen in that, especially in that 2/3 threshold. If you have a monoculture on the execution layer, invalid state transition that printed 10 million ETH or something could be finalized on the order of 10 minutes, which would be a very painful experience to figure out how to move forward from. Not irrecoverable, but certainly not nice. And so in the event that we have high quality execution layer clients that are performing really well moving into the merge, I think it's a really great opportunity to have some shift in that distribution. I think our estimates on Geth are 80% of the network, but actually in terms of consensus forming nodes, it's probably 100%. So I do hope to see a bit of a stepwise shift, but it's also really hard to measure. So if anybody has some ideas on how you can measure the distribution of consensus forming execution layer clients post-merge, it'd be kind of an interesting project. What? Yeah, you can opt in extra data. And thank you. I'm gonna spoof mine. It'll say Ethereum JS. Cool. Yeah, if you want to talk about any of this other stuff, I'm happy to. You can find me here. You can find me and plenty of other places.
All right. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.